What's the most embarrassingly awkward situation you ever encountered while staying at a friend's house as a kid? Mrs. A, my friend's mom, was truly an incredible woman. When I was young, I attended a sleepover at my friend's house. As we were getting ready for bed, a few of us were waiting in the hallway, and one of the other girls was taking a really long time in the bathroom. I desperately needed to use the restroom. Mrs. A was standing in the hallway near me when it happened. I couldn't hold it any longer and had an accident, whizzing my pants right there. Fortunately, no one else noticed except Mrs. A. Do you know what that wonderful woman did? She suddenly pretended to see a spider and accidentally spilled the glass of juice she was holding all over me. She made such a big deal out of it that everyone's attention was diverted from me. She quickly wrapped me in a towel and apologized for her fear of spiders, saying she had lost control. She gave me a change of pajamas and suggested I take a shower to avoid attracting ants. None of the other girls had any idea what really happened and thought Mrs. A was a bit silly. She's my hero. Another time, my parents agreed to have my friend stay the night, and during dinner, they asked her when she'd be picked up the next morning. I felt a sense of dread when she said, "Oh, I'll just take my bus home from school on Monday." My friend had never mentioned she'd be staying the entire weekend with me, so I hadn't told my parents. Luckily, they handled it calmly, but they were quite upset. The unexpected part of the story? My friend didn't even make it through the night. A thunderstorm came, she panicked, and my mom had to drive her across town to her grandparents' house at 3 a.m. I later learned from our other friends that this wasn't the first time she had done something like this. I admit it wasn't really my friend's fault. Her parents should have discussed it with my parents, but she didn't mention anything about it until the dinner conversation, which caught me and my parents by surprise. She actually found the look on my parents' faces amusing and didn't understand why the situation made them uncomfortable. Mrs. A's got the spidey sense for sure, but instead of a web shooter, she's packing a glass of juice. Story 2. When I was in the 4th grade, I had a friend with whom I spent every weekend. We would stay at his house, watching movies or playing games. On one particular day, we were about 5 hours into GTA. We had run out of things to talk about and had been quiet for a while. He turned to me with a big smile on his face and let out one of the loudest gasps I've ever heard. I felt compelled to try and beat his gas, so I let one out too. It wasn't as loud, but it was much longer. We both sat there laughing for a bit when he let another one. It was even louder and longer than both of our previous farts combined. "Try and beat that one," he said. I had prepared myself, getting ready for the fart of my life. Only there was no gas. "Are you going to do it?" He hadn't realized that I had just soiled my pants right there in his room. I told him that he beat me and excused myself to the bathroom. I sat there for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what to do. I finally made my decision. I emptied his bathroom garbage, took the bag and put it in. I stuck the bag in my pocket and left the bathroom. "Hey man, what took so long?" "I'm leaving." "Why?" "Just stop talking." I ran towards the door, jumped on my old BMX bike, and pedaled as fast as I could back to my house. In another incident, I was supposed to meet my friend at his house around 5 because he had an appointment with his mom. I arrived there around 4:45 and headed up to their back. I went up to their big glass doors and saw his dad being intimate with a next-door neighbor. I've never told him this, but I can never be in a room alone with his dad again. Story 3. In 5th grade, I started hanging out with a kid I hadn't spent much time with before. He had a sleepover for his birthday, inviting our mutual friends. Everything was great. We played Nintendo all night in his basement, and his mom cooked lots of food, being really awesome. As it got late, we all started to fall asleep in the basement. Then his dad came home, very intoxicated. His parents began to scream, and we could hear everything from the basement. After about 10 minutes, we heard his older sister try to stop them. It got quiet upstairs, except for his mom crying. We heard her on the phone, and soon after, a police officer arrived to file a report, and a nun came to comfort his mom. We all fell asleep, wondering what had happened. The next morning, we went upstairs and saw some damage, but the mess was cleaned up. We tried to talk to his mom, and she seemed okay, just tired. We offered to take out the trash for her and saw presents in the garbage can outside. That night, his dad left and filed for divorce not long after. His sister didn't come home for a few days until they were sure he wouldn't return. In another story, our friend's sister had a birthday party when we were teenagers. We got really hammered. When we went home, I slept in his bed. My friend's bed is really tall, like over 2 meters, and I retched in the middle of the night, splashing all over his room. I spent the rest of the night cleaning his room. The next day, I was invited for lunch, and they made special food for his sister's birthday. I couldn't make eye contact with anyone. It was so embarrassing. He's still one of my best friends, and his room smelled for another 6 months because of it. We always have a good laugh when we remember the story. Story 4. I was at my friend's house when his parents told him he had to take a bath after I left. He threw a tantrum, crying, screaming, "I refuse! I refuse!" I stood in the steps, unsure of what to do. His parents stayed calm, but I couldn't handle it and quietly left through the back door. He was an interesting kid. In another story, my ex's sister refused to take a shower. My ex and I were downstairs while her parents and sister were screaming at each other upstairs. Her only reason was that she couldn't get her hair to look right after a shower. After one particularly loud argument, her dad came home from work and wouldn't tolerate it anymore. He looked her straight in the eyes and said, "You smell bad. That's why people avoid you." She stormed off to her room. He later apologized and she took a shower that night. That family was strange. I'm glad I'm no longer part of that. Another story happened when I was young. I've had to wear diapers for much of my life, which I'm okay with now, but back then, it was embarrassing. I was staying at a friend's house for a week. He knew about my need for diapers, but another friend who was there didn't. I was preparing to change in the bathroom floor when the other friend walked in on me. I was lying there in a wet diaper with my pajama pants off. He laughed at me and I was in shock, not knowing what to do. He took my bag of supplies and threw them into the pool outside. I was stuck in the bathroom with nothing to change into. His mom had to go to the store to buy me a new pack of diapers while I waited, crying in the bathroom. His dad had to retrieve my supplies from the pool. There were over 25 diapers, half of them for nighttime, and they all expanded in the water, creating a mess in the pool. It took a long time to clean up, and he wouldn't let me help. Story ends well, though. The other friend was banned from the house, and my friend stopped liking him after that incident. The family was very kind to me, and the rest of the week wasn't embarrassing at all. The pool was fixed within 2 days, so that was good. I guess that dad's approach to personal hygiene was tough love with the side of, "You can't sit with us until you shower." Story 5. I was staying at a friend's house in the country for the weekend during 5th grade. They had many animals, including 2 adorable Labrador puppies. Unfortunately, none of their animals were immunized, and one of the puppies contracted distemper and passed away. I think it happened very quickly, but I'm not sure. We were outside when my friend's dad and brother were looking at the other puppy, which was actually very playful. They said this behavior was a sign of distemper and had the puppy euthanized. No one was happy about this, but it seemed like no one minded that we children were present. I didn't know much about distemper at the time. This is the first time I've thought about it in over 10 years, so I can't really remember how my young mind dealt with it. I remember my friend, a girl, was crying, but I wasn't. For some reason, I was comforting her, saying, "Don't worry, it'll be okay." It was strange. Well, I'm glad I got that out of my chest. In another story, I was in either 7th grade when my friend Tyler had a birthday party sleepover. There were probably 10 of us there, playing roller coaster tycoon and having fun, typical middle school stuff. His family had 2 computers, one in Tyler's room and one in the living room. Tyler's computer didn't have internet access. This sets the stage for the story. It was about 1 or 2 a.m. and everyone was in the living room except for a new guy I had met and me. We were playing School Tycoon when we decided to look for some content on his computer. We assumed he would have found a way to download such material, as many boys might. We started searching through every folder and file on his computer. Eventually, we found a hidden folder named Schoolwork, and inside was a video. We opened it and saw a homemade video of someone with long blonde hair doing an act. After a few seconds, we closed the video, convinced that Tyler was interested in specific adult content. We did what many boys our age would do. We showed it to another friend. This happened a few times until all 10 of us were in the room watching the video. That's when we realized the TV remote and the bed in the video looked like the one next to the keyboard, and the bed was the same as the one behind us. It dawned on us that the person in the video wasn't a girl. It was Tyler, with his long California-style blonde hair. He had set up his camera to record himself, and now everyone at the sleepover had seen it. Breakfast the next morning was awkward, especially since Tyler knew who had found his video. Story 6. Back in middle school, my friends and I were into Airsoft, and we took it seriously. We had high-quality equipment, the whole setup. We used to play in the woods behind our neighborhood where there was a field. I was on the edge of the field. There were tall mulch piles at least 9 feet high that we used for cover. I saw my friends on the opposing team coming, so I ran and jumped near one of the mulch piles, but I fell in. As I rolled out, I felt the airsoft pellets hitting me. I'm out! Stop!" I yelled. "You never started," they answered. Then I looked down and saw I was covered in fire ants. I couldn't even see my shirt's color. Panicking, I tried to remove my clothes, but I remembered I was wearing armor that someone else had to remove. So I endured the pain until my friends reached me and took off the armor. The moment they did, I stripped and ran back through the woods, onto the main street of my neighborhood and straight into the living room of the friend whose house I was staying at. There I made eye contact with his parents, who were on the couch. Without stopping, I ran out the back door and jumped into the pool. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 7. My friend's 10th birthday was an eventful one. We had 6 friends over and we stayed up late watching the first South Park movie. The birthday boy Nolan received a motor scooter as his main gift. The next morning we woke up to find small pieces of scat in odd places on the floor. which we initially thought were from Nolan's dog. However, we would soon discover that the situation was much worse. Later, we were taking turns riding the scooter. Before my turn, my friend Curtis took a ride. As he handed me the scooter, I noticed something unusual: brown stains in the seat. We asked Curtis about it and immediately wished we hadn't. Curtis had an accident and didn't change his clothes before riding the scooter. I'm 20 years old now and I will never forget that story. It was the most awkward birthday party I've ever been to. In another story, when I was in grade school, I had a friend who lived near my house. He had a treehouse, a Sega Genesis, a Game Boy Color, a Super Nintendo, and countless games and movies. I didn't have any of those things, so I spent a lot of time at his place. A few months after we started hanging out, I had a sleepover at his house. We went to the bathroom, and a few minutes later, I heard him call out, "Mom, I'm ready." His mom then yelled to his dad, "Bob, it's your turn." It turned out that his parents were still wiping him after using the bathroom. We were probably around adolescent age, and he had no physical or cognitive handicaps. Another time I needed to use the bathroom in the middle of the night and accidentally clogged the toilet. Thinking that flushing it multiple times would solve the problem, I ended up flooding the bathroom with dirty water. Yet another incident involved the same friend in the same toilet, also in the middle of the night. The water pipe was frozen, but I really needed to go, so I left a large scat in the dry bowl. In the morning, the entire downstairs reeked, and his parents avoided making eye contact. Story 8. This incident didn't occur while I was staying at their house, but afterward, I could never stay there again. I was an adult, and had been best friends with Sue, who lived across the street from me since I was a kid. I had recently been hired at an adult store and was still uncomfortable around the shelves of adult toys and the older male customers. My boss noticed and scolded me, saying I needed to appear relaxed and engage with the customers or they wouldn't feel comfortable and I would be fired. So, I resolved to do just that. I thought, the next person who walks in, I'll be cool and calm and talk to them about their interests. The bell rang while I was in the back, stocking DVDs. When I came out, the customer had his back to me, browsing the selection of toys. He already had a large one in his hands. I approached him and said, "That's a popular choice. We sell a lot of those, and customers always seem happy with their purchase." The man turned around, and it was Sue's father, a man who had watched me grow up, made me lunch when I was a kid, and put Band-Aids on my scraped knees. We made eye contact, and I'm sure my expression matched his look of horror when he realized who I was. He put down the item without a word. I turned around and went straight back to the stockroom. He left the store and we have never discussed the incident. Every time I see him, I know he's thinking about it too. I told my dad about it a few years later. He laughed and joked that I might have ruined a special night for Sue's mother. Oh dear. I guess customer service with a smile takes on a whole new meaning in this situation. I hope her poker face was on point. Story 9. I was spending the night at my friend's house. As young girls, we were watching the movie Grease and dancing around the living room. During Grease Lightning, my friend's mom suddenly came out of her room and yelled at her daughter, "Why are you dancing like that? You look like a whale." Her friend was only 5'2" and weighed about 105 pounds at most. She ran to her room crying, and I followed to comfort her. After she calmed down, I suggested that I should probably leave. I was 5'3" and weighed around 180 pounds at the time, and I couldn't help but wonder what her mom thought about my weight. Just then, her mom came into the room, dragged her by the arm into the bathroom, and said, "Look at your arms in the mirror. You see how round they are?" My friend was sobbing and pleading with her mom to stop. Then I heard her mom say, "How do you think she feels? She thinks you're calling her fat." Her mom came to see me and told me not to feel bad, saying I was naturally big boned and could never be skinny. She added that even if I did lose weight, it wouldn't look good on me. I stood there awkwardly as she patted me on the back and walked away. I cried myself to sleep that night and left the next morning before she woke up. I still cringe at the awkwardness of that argument. That must have been incredibly awkward and hurtful. It's a good reminder that words can have a lasting impact, and kindness should always be our first choice. Story 10. I've had bladder issues since I was young. Not during the day, but at night. I couldn't wake up to use the bathroom. I'm an adult now and it still happens occasionally, but I can usually wake up and go. It was embarrassing to wet the bed when I was young. I refused to wear diapers and just did my laundry when it happened. My parents pretended it wasn't a problem. It was nothing they tried working. I thought I'd grow out of it. I'm naturally shy and was bullied, so I didn't have many friends or sleepovers. I became friends with a girl who had already graduated from her middle school. She was goth and cool. I admired her and wanted to be like her. We lost touch after she graduated. Then she unexpectedly called and invited me to watch The Nightmare Before Christmas and have a sleepover. The idea of a sleepover terrified me, but I wanted to hang out with her, so I agreed. We had a good time, watched the movie, and fell asleep in her bed. When I woke up, the spot under me was wet. I felt panic and dread, like anything I've experienced since. I was far enough away in the big bed that it didn't affect her. She was still asleep. My clothes in the bed were starting to dry. I called my parents, snuck out, and broke down crying in the car. I never heard from Raven or her parents again. I'm truly sorry, Raven. Story 11. I was at a friend's house for a group sleepover when, in the middle of the night, a guy asked, "Hey, what girl do you like?" Eager to impress my popular friends, I jumped into the conversation, asking increasingly inappropriate questions, thinking I was earning their respect. When the host's dad walked in, I realized my friends were looking at me in shock and disgust, not admiration. I tried to be cool but ended up looking like a creep. The dad just told us to go to sleep, and while some friends forgave me, others never spoke to me again. I was mortified and later developed a phobia of the topic, which might have improved my life in the long run. Another time, I got a migraine at a party but tried to tough it out. When the pain became unbearable, I could only bury my head in a pillow. I ended up retching everywhere, just as the movie credits started. The host's mom cleaned it up and sent us to bed. I felt better after retching and didn't go home. I also remember being at a friend's house for a sleepover. We decided to spend the night in the treehouse, which was fancy but lacked heating and plumbing. We were freezing under a pile of blankets watching a movie. One friend needed to use the bathroom, but instead of going to the house, he pooped in a trash can and tried to clean himself with leaves. I was sent to get toilet paper and soap, but the host's parents caught us and made us sleep in the warm basement. Story 12. The incident occurred on the way back. I was one of those kids who couldn't find their parents. The girl's mother had to drive me to my grandmother's house because no one was at my home. She was clearly upset about having to drive an extra 5 miles and complained the entire time. I remember her anger and the tension, but I couldn't identify her now. She never acknowledged me or spoke to me. I tried to make myself as small as possible in the backseat, and her daughter, my friend, attempted to calm the situation from the front. I was fully aware that I was an unwanted burden and felt like a complete nuisance. Things had been going well until then. It was incredibly awkward. She didn't even drive all the way to the house. She dropped me off at the bottom of a long hill and drove away quickly. The girl and I never spoke again. We were both embarrassed. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.